In this video help, I'm going to be covering the invoice, and this is actually the live invoice after you input the data over in the client's screen where you added it to the input area for the invoice. The invoice actually generates a report, and the report is what you use in order to identify which invoices that you want to work with. For example, if I were in one of the client records, like myself right here, which there are very few pieces of data in here right now, if I had a lot of records, this would go all the way off the screen with all the possible invoices that were in the system. And right now there's only a couple invoices because you can see that by the number here, like number, here we go, let's see, invoice number 1. If I went to next, you can see there's only one invoice in there. So we have one invoice in the system. There are IDs in here for a second reference ID for a client. Here's the client name for that particular reference ID. So there's actually two invoices in here. So if I wanted to find this particular invoice and I went to the find mode, since this is a report, what you're doing is you're going to go ahead and click on the find, and it's going to create a drop-down list where you can put the person's name in there. But if you know which invoice you're looking for, that's where you're going to want to go. So I'm going to click over here and see the name, and I know that I've got one invoice in there, so I'm going to click it. And here's the dates of the invoices. There's two consecutive. There's one for the 17th and one for the 20th for ID number 1, which is me. So if I click on it right now without picking an actual invoice by the date, I'm going to get all that data for me. So let's go ahead and do that just so we can see it. And what it did is it gave us both the 17th and the 20th. Well, what I've done is I put a thing in there. Say, for example, you ran this and it was blank and you didn't want it now. You could go over here and say omit, click it, and now you're just showing the invoice for the 17th. And this is why when I was doing the invoice input, I mentioned that you need to put in the invoice date. It's critical when you're running the report so you can see the date and the client ID record. So if I click in this now, you're going to see I don't have anything I can see here because I'm not in the find mode. If I'm in the find mode, it's going to show a drop down so I can pick through that. Let's just do it one more time just so we can see it. Let's go to Doherty, which is supposed to be number 2. I'm going to click on it and I'm going to say, okay, it's the record ID for Doherty. I can do it another way. I could say, give me all the Doherty records. Well, if I say find now, it says it's a mistake because I didn't pick any one of the individual ones. So let's do it now. I'm going to go Doherty again, but this time I'm going to go over and say an invoice date. And I know Doherty is number 2. I'm going to say I want his invoice number 2. I can do it from over here or over here. It doesn't make any difference where you click. It still gives you the ability to pick it. Now I say perform the find. And for some reason it's saying that there's not the right information in there. So let's try something. Let's go up here and pick from the name field. Apparently there's not a valid, oh, here it is right up here, Brent Doherty. I had the wrong Doherty. Maybe, I don't know, let's find out. Sometimes you have to test around until you get it right. Let's go back in and say, who is the guy that's actually in there? There is, let's say show all so we can see them all. And in this particular case, it does have Brent Doherty, ID number 2, and the date for the 12/14. So let's go back, and I'm showing you this is the kind of typical thing you got to do. It's not really that hard. I'm just going to look for 12/14. So there's the 12/14, and I'm just going to go say find that one. And there it is. And it's Brad Doherty. So there's a couple of different ways to find information if you need it. You just need to know something when you're leaving the customer area. What invoice on what invoice date do you want to run? And that's what you need to do. You need to create a find for the invoice that you want, so when you go to print it, you have the right one showing. Now, none of this is going to print over here, okay? Only the actual invoice will print with the information. Now, in the actual live record, there's no address in it, there's no zip code, and there's nothing in here for that in the actual real record. It's bringing over a editable invoice number, so you have the ability to do an FRQ, which is a quote, and then put a number in it. You can repeat an invoice, or you can do whatever you want as far as the actual invoice number. It doesn't make any difference. And I wanted to have that flexibility for people that have to actually identify, say like, in this case it says FR, but it could be FD for Brent, or BD for Brent Doherty. I think my user typed that in there, not knowing that you actually use the first character of the name and the last name, first name, last name, and make it BD, and then put your 0001 in there. You have to watch this video to know that that's the way you're supposed to be doing your invoice numbers. That way it's very simple to look at and know that that's what it is. And I can tell by looking at the address that this is my user that put that in there. He's getting this actual database, this custom database. Okay, now showing omitted is kind of fun. If you click show omitted, what it's going to do is it's going to show the individual invoices information of the ones that were omitted. So for example, if I wanted to run another find, I would take Doherty out of the loop and everything else would be shown back up again. Or what I can do is just say show all, and what it does is it brings them all back. Now this particular thing here shows that there was not an item added into this. I'm just going to throw it in there because this data is all just test data anyhow. So now that we've got it in there, I have all the records that are currently in the database. There's 3 actual invoice dates and 2 clients that were actually in here. And the last thing you need to know is that you can go to the work order if you needed to, and you can also look at the work order as far as the information to back up to see if there's a work order for that invoice. So if you had to come over here and add a numeral in here to make a deduction in the actual inventory count, you could do it from here. And then you can always go back to the invoice, pop over to the invoice again in the line here, billing invoice, and now you'd be right back in the invoice where you can work on it again. Now you can edit from here, but I really need you to do it in the client records on the invoice input rather than try to edit within this screen, because you end up by causing yourself some real problems trying to remember how you did everything. Okay, so that being said, this is the way that this thing should work. And a little passing information up here, this is where you put your address in, and you can also replace the logo in here by saying insert picture and take out the current picture that's in there and put your own business address up here at the top. If you edit something up here like add a zip code or an address or a company address, city, and so forth, it will become part of Brent Doherty's record. So just so you know, you're updating the actual record. If you delete or take something out, you're also taking it out. This area on the record is the calculation for the invoice that you're working within. So if you run a new invoice, the data for Brent Doherty for the invoice that you're showing will be calculated and placed in the top of the screen. And as you can see here, even though I'm only picking one, there's no cumulative thing here. I'm looking, for example, if I jump over to here, you're going to see things change again because I'm looking at this particular invoice up on the top. The only reason we're doing the find is so we match the top of the record with the actual items that are in the record. Now, as I said before, if you have questions and you need some assistance, you can always call me or Skype me, and I'll walk you through any of the questions that you have. Thank you.